The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Election day is fast approaching, and three major candidates for governor are trying to win your vote. Each has sat down here for a 30-minute interview. On this edition of One-on-One, we welcome the candidate who is hoping to upset the apple cart. 49-year-old Greg Orman has an economics degree from Princeton. He has parlayed that into a successful business career, which has made him a multi-millionaire. Now he is taking on the two-party system with a powerful independent campaign, the likes of which is rarely seen in Kansas politics. Orman was a registered Republican until 2007, when he became a Democrat. In 2008, he briefly entered the Democratic race for U.S. Senate, but he quickly dropped out, expressing disappointment in both political parties. Then in 2014, Orman ran as an independent. He garnered 43% of the vote, but lost the U.S. Senate race to Republican Pat Roberts. Now in 2018, Orman is back in the ring, this time as an independent running for governor. History shows that winning as an independent is a tall mountain to climb in our entrenched two-party system. Does this guy have the right stuff? Why does he think he'll be a good governor? Let's try to size him up as we go one-on-one with gubernatorial candidate Greg Orman right now. Hello and thanks for watching. I'm Victor Hogstrom. I'm pleased to welcome Greg Orman, independent candidate for governor for the state of Kansas. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Victor. I'm happy to be here.
Mr. Orman, you are very successful in the world of business. What was it about your childhood that set you up for such success?
You know, I actually grew up in a single-parent family with 5 brothers and sisters, and so I spent my whole life working hard. I spent my whole life, really trying to help my family and ultimately be in a position, where I could afford just the little things in life. I had great public schools. I had teachers who were really invested in me, and with a combination of a little hard work and a lot of people who invested in me, I was able to sort of live my own version of the American dream.
So are you saying you grew up poor?
I did, yeah. We got free and reduced price lunches. I think we got all sorts of products from the Department of Agriculture. I've probably eaten more cheese sandwiches than most people. But I had a mother who really loved me and took care of me. My father actually had a small furniture store in Stanley, Kansas. And so I'd spend my summers working for my dad at the furniture store. He referred to my brother and I as SOBs, sons of the boss. And he said we had to work twice as hard for half as much money. And so I think watching my father, sort of run his own business and be his own boss really had an impact on me. And I decided at one point that when I graduated from college, I was going to start the first good business idea I had.
And talking about college, you attended Princeton. I
did, yeah. I was fortunate enough to be able to go there. I thought it was a great school.
How did it happen?
I actually did a lot of youth and government programs as a kid. I was obviously pretty good in school, and so did well academically, but I think it was the success that I had in various leadership programs that really opened up the doors for me at a place like Princeton.
So what is the single most important thing that your Princeton education has taught you?
Well, Princeton was an interesting place for me. Growing up the way I grew up, I really didn't feel like I belonged there until about, probably 3 or 4 semesters into my Princeton experience.
And why is that?
Just because I was a kid from a small town who, grew up and didn't have a whole lot, and here I was at Princeton, a place where there were a lot of kids who who grew up with a very different environment than I did. And so I just, for a period of time, just didn't feel like I fit in. But really, it was all about persistence. It's all about, sort of recognizing that you're as good as the next person, and that if you work hard and you're persistent, that you can succeed at a place like that.
So did you have a scholarship at Princeton?
I got a lot of guaranteed student loans. I got a Pell Grant. Ultimately, Princeton was a place that if you could get in, they were going to figure out a way for you to afford it.
Oh.
And so I got a lot of help, a lot of scholarships along the way. And I worked every summer, and I had to contribute my earnings from work. I had a work-study job when I was at Princeton, and so I worked about 20 hours a week when I was there, but I worked my way through.
So tell us about your career now in the world of business. You graduated from college, returned to Kansas, and you established your own business.
Well, the first business I started was actually a company called Environmental Lighting Concepts. We designed and installed energy-efficient lighting systems for commercial and industrial buildings. And I actually started that business about 9 months after graduating from college. Someone approached my father and wanted to put an energy-efficient lighting system in his furniture store. And my dad sent me the proposal and said, "What do you think?" And I looked at it and I said, you'd be stupid not to do it. And then I thought to myself, well, if he's stupid not to do it, I'd be stupid not to try to sell this stuff. And so we started a company, and I tell people if I'd have known in the beginning what I learned over the first 9 months, I never would have started that business. But once you get into it, you got to figure it out. And we were able to figure out the right way to sell the product. We designed great solutions, and ultimately I built that business over 4 years with the help of some partners and some great employees. And in 1996, Kansas City Power and Light approached me and said, "We want to buy your company." And so I sold 70% of my business in 1996 to Kansas City Power and Light. It brought me to Kansas full time. My father lived here, and my father had started a second family, so I had 4 brothers and sisters who lived here as well, and so it was a great opportunity for me to really build a life in Kansas.
And now you are selling yourself to be governor for the state of Kansas. What qualifies you, in your opinion, to be the governor for Kansas?
Well, I think if you look at the job of a governor, so many people think of it as a policy job. But the reality is, in the area of policy, you've got 165 partners in the legislature. The job of governor is really a management job. If we look at some of the failings of Governor Brownback, one of the issues he had, I think, was he never really managed anything before. So he didn't know how to inspire people and get better performance on limited resources. I've got a track record of growing and building companies. I've got a track record of getting better performance out of large organizations. I'm the only candidate in this race that has that track record. On the one hand, we've got another candidate who's got no management experience. And on the other hand, we have a candidate who's managed small organizations pretty poorly. And so I think if we're going to try to create a state where we get better results for people, where we spend our dollars wisely, and where we ultimately deliver better outcomes for the people of Kansas, we need someone with my background and experience.
You seem to have had an interest in politics for a while now. Once you've run for several positions. Unfortunately, you did not win. But why, as a successful businessman, why get involved in this dirty business of politics?
I've always had an interest in public service. In fact, I tell people I came by my interest in politics honestly. My maternal grandfather was actually Hubert Humphrey's top aide for 25 years. In fact, held the Bible when Humphrey was inaugurated Vice President of the United States. My mother was a nurse. She was in the nurses union. Given her family history, she was very much a Democrat. I got the chance to meet Reagan as a kid at the White House. I was 17 years old. I was in a program that the American Legion sponsored called Boys Nation. I came home and I told my dad I might want to get into politics someday, and he said, maybe you should skip the internship and go straight into crime. And so, my father was obviously very much a Republican. But for me, my dad had a serious point. He said, you might decide to get into politics someday. And if you do, that's fine. But I'd prefer you accomplish something with your life first. be in a position where you have real experiences to contribute and you can really solve problems for people. And he said, and preferably put yourself in a position where you're financially secure enough that you can afford to lose an election. Because in my dad's mind, your health and your integrity were the only two things that mattered. And if you lost one of them, it made life really difficult. And so I took his advice. That's why I went into the private sector. That's why I've been creating jobs and opportunities for people for over 25 years. But I've always had an interest in public service. And I'm returning to that interest now in large part because I do believe I'm in a position, maybe uniquely positioned, to help turn around what I see are 2 decades of decline in Kansas.
So was your dad your mentor, or is he your mentor?
My dad is certainly someone who's had a real influence on my life, and as has my mother. I think if I think about the story of my life, it's my teachers and my parents who are the heroes. The people who really invested in me, really cared about the outcomes for me in my life, really made me a priority. And so, absolutely, I've learned a lot from my father.
So I have an interesting question for you. What similarities do you see between you and another successful businessman who has become president of the United States?
Well, it's an interesting question. Look, obviously, he and I are temperamentally very different people. There's no question about that. But I do think having an experience, having a track record of creating jobs and opportunities for people, being in a position to understand the impact of regulations, of rising healthcare costs on our ability to create jobs for people, I think that is actually very good preparation for the job of governor, and probably far better preparation than someone who's been a lifetime career partisan politician.
So tell us then about your evolution from being a Republican to a Democrat, now to independent candidate. If the independents were a party, I would say you've been a member of all 3 parties. Why such change?
Yeah, well, just to understand my political history, the issue that's always animated me most is our federal finances. I've always been very concerned about our ability as a country to pay for the things we need to pay for, like Social Security, like Medicare, to take care of our population, but to do it in a way that we're not burdening future generations with huge debt. So in college, I was a part of the college Republicans. In fact, I drove a flatbed truck with the entire national media on the back of it in front of George H.W. Bush when he was campaigning for president. But in 1992, I was really captivated by Ross Perot, and I really liked what I heard from him. Here was a business guy, who was basically saying, look, we've got to stop being children. We've got to grow up and start solving our problems as a nation. And I think he had a really sort of good platform of balancing the budget, streamlining our tax code so average Americans could pay their taxes on a postcard, and ultimately that really resonated with me. So I've spent most of my life since 1992 really as a political independent. And while I've tried both parties, I've been incredibly disappointed with both parties. I think they are right now nothing more than aggregation points for special interests, for PAC money, for lobbyist money, and I don't think they're serving the American people, and I don't think they're serving the people of Kansas. That's one of the reasons my campaign will not accept $1 from PACs. We won't accept $1 from lobbyists or corporations, because I really want to represent the people of Kansas. And to me, that's what being politically independent is about. It's about putting your state and your country ahead of a political party. It's about using facts and common sense to solve problems, not clinging to rigid ideologies. And ultimately, it's about being free from the obligations to party bosses, to special interests, to corporations, so that you can independently represent the people of Kansas.
That sounds like a good description of an independent, but are you more conservative or liberal?
I would say, again, if you want to categorize me, I'm fiscally much more responsible, I'm socially much more moderate. At the end of the day, though, I think both of our parties have been offering solutions to problems that they're pulling from 2 very outdated playbooks. And I think if we're going to solve the problems that Kansas has, We need new ideas. We need new solutions. We need to start thinking about answers to our problems that neither party is willing to consider. If you look at what's gone on in Kansas, since 1991, our health outcomes in the state have declined dramatically. We were the 8th healthiest state in the nation in 1991. In 2011, we were the 25th healthiest state in the nation, and that's where we stand today.
What happened?
A whole range of things, but ultimately we've got a series of policies that both Democrats and Republicans have pursued that have really failed the state. I mean, you can look at other issues. Look at our pension. When Kathleen Sebelius took office in 2002, we had about a $2 billion unfunded liability in our pension. Once she got into office, that started an upward trend, and it hasn't stopped since. Median household income in Kansas was $57,000 in 2003, the year Sebelius took office. It was $49,000 the year Sam Brownback took office. We've had 2 decades of decline in Kansas because we have parties who are more interested in seeing their party succeed than they are in seeing the state succeed.
Let's learn about your family, your personal life, and who are you?
Yeah, well, great question. Well, I've got a wonderful wife, Sybil. She's a public school teacher, taught in the Turner School District in Kansas City, Kansas. And really, as I watched her teach those kids, she was the light and the life of so many of those kids' lives. I've got 2 beautiful daughters, Imogen and Sigrid. Imogen's just over 3 years old. Sigrid's 9 months old, actually. Wow. She was born on my birthday. I tell people that means it's no longer my birthday. It's now her birthday.
So true.
Yeah. But and she is the happiest baby I've ever met. In fact, she loves Daniel Tiger. So if Daniel Tiger comes on, she's all smiles and laughs. So.
Good reason to support public television if you became governor.
Yeah, it's a terrific reason. I can't tell you how often I've used lessons from Daniel Tiger to talk to particularly my 3-year-old daughter. She's she's a big fan as well, and started off being a big fan of Elmo. So public television I think is very important, and certainly important in the lives of our young people.
Greg, we play a little game on this program every week when I have a guest that our producer develops. So this game is, I'll start a sentence and you finish it.
Okay.
The first one is, I would describe my personality as?
Happy.
My patience is most tested when?
When I have to put my 2 daughters to bed and they don't want to go to bed.
My favorite way to relax is?
Playing golf.
My most prized possession is?
My family.
The biggest setback I've ever suffered is?
I don't know that I've faced setbacks, but I look at them as opportunities to learn.
My biggest surprise in life was?
How wonderful being a dad can be.
The best president during my lifetime was or is?
I would actually say there's sort of a tie there. I think both Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton were actually pretty good presidents.
I agree with you. The happiest moment of my life was or is?
When my first daughter was born healthy. She was 6 weeks premature, so.
The saddest moment of my life is?
Probably when I've lost each of my grandparents.
If I could ask God one question, what would that be?
Oh gosh, that's one I'd have to think about a little bit. I really don't. What do I have to do to get into heaven?
That's a good question. Okay. Describe the perfect governor for us.
Well, I think the perfect governor is somebody who's pragmatic, somebody who cares deeply about the state of Kansas, and somebody who can really just serve the voters of Kansas.
Are you that person?
I believe so. I believe, right now we've been traveling the state. We've been talking about the policies that we need to pursue to grow the state of Kansas, to create jobs and opportunities for people, to keep our kids here. I'm going to go to Topeka and work really hard every day to improve the lives of Kansans. And I think that's what Kansans deserve.
And if you were elected governor, what would be your top priority?
Well, first and foremost, we've got to grow the Kansas economy. We've got to create the jobs and opportunities that keep our kids here, grow the economy so we can expand our tax base without raising tax rates, and ultimately invest in the priorities that make Kansas a great place to live, to work, to build a family, to build a life.
So what is the one thing you would, if nothing else, the one thing you would like to accomplish as governor?
Well, again, I want to turn around the trends in Kansas that have seen Kansas decline relative to the rest of the nation. But the other thing I would say is Kansas has a legacy of leadership. William Allen White, the famed Emporia Gazette editor, once said, when anything's going to happen in America, it happens first in Kansas. Populism, prohibition, the bull moose, all those political movements started in Kansas. It's safe to say the issue that brought the nation to the brink of the Civil War was whether or not Kansas would be admitted as a free state. We used to lead. We used to be a state that other states look to for inspiration and ideas. Now we're sort of a cautionary tale. And my real goal here, we need to change the narrative. We need to get people to stop talking about what's the matter with Kansas and start talking about what's right about our state. And there are so many things that are right about Kansas that as governor I would hope to be able to illuminate and really be the chief spokesperson and the chief salesperson for the state of Kansas.
Now the three candidates, gubernatorial candidates running for this position live on the northeastern side of the state. The question is, what do you plan to do specifically to help Wichita thrive and grow?
Well, again, that's
the largest city.
Sure, great question. We have released a very detailed economic development plan that's available on our website, ormanforkansas.com, where we talk about the things that we want to do to help the whole state grow, including Wichita. And I think we really have to approach that the way I'd approach it in the private sector, which is to say, if we want to grow a business or create a new opportunity, what are the things that we would have to do? And first and foremost, it's leverage our strengths. And Kansas has a lot of strengths, not the least of which is leadership in areas like aviation, where Wichita is strongest. And so I think we need to leverage those strengths, including our leadership in aviation, to create more jobs and opportunities for people. But again, our full plan on that is available on our website.
So tell us about the greatest challenge you've had in your life.
I've had a lot of challenges. I've spent my life turning around, in many cases, businesses, companies where they've had, year after year of losses, very similar, I suspect, to some of the situations you've walked into in your life, but year over year of losses where the employees are demoralized, where they're afraid for their jobs, where they're not sure how they're going to feed their family next month. And so going into those situations and being able to turn them around, those are always challenging, and you always have to make difficult decisions. But I think I've developed a track record of being able to do that in a way that will be really helpful to the state of Kansas. And I think if you look at a lot of those turnarounds, those businesses I've been able to turn around, they've got a lot of the same characteristics of the state of Kansas. We've got a public employee system in the state of Kansas where they've been, sort of the butt of political jokes and beat up, by people who want to say all government is bad. We've got a state that's had historically declining revenues in terms of relative to neighboring states. We had economic growth actually decline recently. So in some senses, Kansas is a turnaround, and the challenges that I've faced in my past, make me uniquely qualified to help turn it around.
What would you say is the lead story of your life?
I think I've just been so fortunate to be able to live my own version of the American dream. Again, I grew up in a single-parent household. I tell people my first job was getting wasp nests out of the eaves of houses. I got paid $1/4 a wasp nest. But with the benefit of good public schools, teachers who really invested in me, parents who loved and cared about me, I was able to live my version of the American dream. And what I really want to do is help all Kansans live their own version of the American dream and make sure all Kansas children have the opportunity to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish with my life.
Describe that American dream for a Kansan.
Well, I think it's different for everybody. You know, I don't want to impose my own vision on others in terms of what their dreams are. Maybe their dream is to follow in my footsteps and be successful in business and ultimately create businesses and jobs and opportunities for people. For some people, the American dream might be to be the lead violinist in an orchestra. I mean, everybody's dream's different, but I think what we can do as government is we can create an environment where everybody can thrive, where everybody can succeed, and that's really what I want to do.
So what is your philosophy of life?
Well, my philosophy of life is, I said this at one point in my life, I want to love and be loved. I want to have the respect of the people that I respect, and ultimately I want people to say, Greg changed our lives for the better. Greg was a force for good.
Okay, so here's my final question. Mm-hmm. To what extent should the state provide funding for public television and public radio stations? We are about the only locally owned television station that's left in the state, only locally owned. And in the past, the state once funded. You're surrounded by states that support their public broadcast systems. Kansas does it in a very insignificant manner.
Well, you sort of buried the lead, didn't you? Look, like I said, my daughters love public television. I think it can be an important tool in helping our kids learn, helping to educate the public. And so, I would love to be able to see us in a position where we can return support to public education. I worked out at a health club as a kid, and I remember a picture on the wall that said, you can't repair in a day what it's taken a lifetime to destroy. Kansas is digging out of a hole. We've got lots of things that we need to invest dollars in, and I'm hopeful that over time we're going to be able to not only restore dollars to public education, but be able to fund our roads and our bridges, be able to deliver every kid a high-quality public education, ultimately address issues like healthcare affordability, higher education affordability, childcare costs, all those things that make many of the average Kansans that I talk to feel like they're not just treading water, they're drowning. And so, there are lots of priorities that we need to work to get reinstituted in the state of Kansas so we can make this a place where all our kids feel inspired to build their lives.
Greg Orman, gubernatorial candidate for Kansas. Thank you.
Victor, my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
A pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And we're glad you took the time to watch this edition of One on One. We've now had all three major gubernatorial candidates on the program. We hope it has helped you get to know them all a little better. I'm Victor Hogstrom. Thanks for watching.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Call KPTS to receive a DVD copy of this program for a $40 donation. You can also send a check or money order along with the program name, date, and time to the address on your screen. And you will receive a 1-year KPTS membership.